New single Place in My Heart was scheduled for October 83 as a teaser for an album to follow the next month. However, both the single and the album were pulled following Ross and McClemont's decision to leave the group, citing musical differences, which means we think that guy's a twat.
Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. I'm Andy, and that is John, and it is time to check out some tunes. So, John, what do you have in store for me today, my friend?
We have a band called Orange Juice.
Delicious.
Yeah. And the song is called Rip It Up.
Rip it up. Okay. Pulp or no pulp? Where do you stand on that, John?
I don't mind pulp, to be fair. Obviously the breakthrough album. No, sorry. In terms of drinking, unfortunately, I can't really drink fruit juice anymore since being diagnosed diabetic because without the fiber, the sugar goes straight in. So
Yeah.
I used to love apple juice. No, it's not wise, because obviously fruit by definition has a lot of sugar in it anyway.
Yeah.
But so yeah, if I was. I don't mind loads of pulp in orange, to be fair.
Yeah.
That's something about it feels like having a meal, a proper meal.
Yeah, likewise. It also, for some reason, to me, speaks to its freshness. I'm like, oh yeah, this shit must be extra fresh. There's orange in it. Like, of course there's fucking orange in it. Right on. Okay, cool. Now that that's established, some important shit's hashed out. Let me go and check out this Rip It Up by Orange Juice, and I will let you all know my thoughts. Hold on. This is interesting here. The sounds, I'm hearing like these plonks and what sounds like water droplets going into like a small puddle at the bottom of your sink's reservoir. Yeah, and then there's that funk pop guitar, like strum pattern. I really like that, actually. It's all odd and quirky, but for me, engaging at the same time. So, let's take it back and take this all in again. That's so weird.
When I first saw you, something stood within me. You were standing salty in the rain. If I could have held you, I would have held.
I'm not discerning everything that's being said here. It sounds like it's pointed at another individual, though. This sort of dialogue or reflection that we're getting. This is super fun, and that's kind of like partly why I'm distracted away from the narrative, because I'm just feeling these interesting plonks and rhythmic touches that they're putting on throughout this. And it sounds like we've got obviously a main singer, but there's another voice that's just come in, and even though I'm not discerning most of what they're saying, they're clearly harmonizing really well because their voices do sound good together. All right, let's pull it back just a few.
Standing salty in the rain. If I could have held you, I would have held you. Rip it up and start again. Rip it up and start again. Rip it up and start again. I hope to God you're not as dumb as you make out. I hope to God. I hope to God.
the effects, they're experimenting with some stuff here, which is interesting to hear. I don't know what it sounded like, wah or chorus or even flanger on the guitar there for a minute. I've said this before when other bands have used similar effects. For some reason, it sounds like liquidy to me, like, I don't know, aquatic in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not trying to be influenced by this very interesting torpedo shark, swimming through the surf here, but it does have this, I don't know, this fluidity to it, the sounds. Let's pull that back again.
To God, I hope to God.
Whatever that is replicating the bass has it going on as well too. I don't know what that is, but that's not a bass, but it's playing the role of the bass, and it also has this, you know what it reminds me of? What I'd love, I'm listening to this, I'd love to hear Thundercat play with this song and like replicate that on an actual bass and try to capture it through pedals and different settings that he could use. But he's very innovative when it comes to being really quirky and odd with the bass, and we've checked out some, like, I think we've done one video or one episode dedicated to a track of his. Yeah, he's an interesting mind when it comes to the bass, and I'd love to see him tinker around with this because it has some of that Thundercat quality to it. Oddly enough, I wouldn't have thought it.
In my heart, reach out for you. My arms stuck like glue to my sides. If I could have held you, I would have held you. Jump right and swallow my pride. Rip it up and start again. Rip it up and start again.
Yeah, I'm getting that. Rip it up and start again.
I hope God you're not as dumb as you make out.
I hope to God you're not as dumb as you make out. Or is that what he said? That's. I would hate to have that written about me.
To God, I hope to God, and I hope to God I'm not as dumb as you make out. I hope to God, I hope to God, and there were times I take my pen and feel obliged to start again. I take the fact that there are things in life that one can't quite express. You know me, I'm acting dumb. You know the seed is very humdrum, and my favorite song's entitled
Because of course, saxophone. I'm sorry, I gotta take that back. That guitar sounded, what I think is a guitar, sounded really odd there, in a good way. But it was just, and the way it goes right into that sax, they almost sound very similar from a tonal standpoint, which is interesting too. The vocal runs. Mariah Carey, he is not. But that was fun and I mean, all of this was so quirky that it became like super charming. Uh, and like I had mentioned earlier, it sounded like that they were experimenting with this sound. For some reason, there's clearly competence, but it feels like there's not a lot of earned confidence yet tinkering with this stuff because the blueprint was all quite repetitive, but everything sounded good. It all sounded really fun. It just didn't sound like they were comfortable yet having a lot of different moving parts as far as different parts of the song. It was all pretty, straightforward. I thought it was really good though. I thought it was really cool and fun. And yeah, I'm gonna reiterate what I said before. To hear Thundercat play with this song would be a lot of fun. It's not something that I expect I would be saying at any point throughout this listen, and yet here we are. Yeah, I really liked whatever they were tinkering with there, and it did give the song this oddball funk meets pop with some electronic stuff in there as well, which is not those aren't usually ingredients to songs. So this is a lot of fun to listen to. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's an indicator about what year this came out, but that would also play into and inform sort of my estimation about how experimental this might be, or groundbreaking in the idea of like injecting some of these effects into a I don't know what you would like a mainstream pop song or rock song. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to listen to and try to dissect, and then you hear all of these other sounds outside of that faux bass or that like electronic bass substitute. You hear all of these like plonks and drips, and they're clearly toying around with something that they like, and it feels like it's new to them. I don't know how else to convey it, but that's kind of what it sounded like giving this a go. I really like that they did tinker with this and play with this because it made it for a really interesting listen. And I'm now eager to learn more about this from John. So let's go catch up with him and chop it up.
David Welke, he's back. So you've had to listen to Rip It Up by Orange Juice. What do you reckon?
There's plenty to reckon here, that's for sure. This one has a bit of that charming quirkiness to it right out of the gate, with this pleasant pop meets funk guitar strumming motif, coupled with some very oddly aquatic sound effects, and the most basic hi-hat reliant drum beat. I know I've said this before, but a lot of these effects always seem liquid to me. Like they're fluid, and at points it sounds like there is this like droplets of water that are dripping into a puddle in the reservoir of your sink. These plunks that are going on that I found really, really interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You were witnessing the funk being distilled before you.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it is. Excellent. Yeah, it's a fair point. It's pretty clear that the more predominant synth-like effect is like being played as the bass part. I talked about some of the more ancillary synthetic like sounds that I heard. But that one is really carrying the day as far as being the bass in the song. Go ahead.
Expert, but footage I've seen them playing this live, it comes through the bass and then through some sort of effect.
That's what it is. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it doesn't sound.
I
know it's the bass, but it doesn't sound like a bass, if that makes sense.
It could be keyboard shenanigans for the recording of this. I don't know, but I've seen. So I'm nowhere. It could be either.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like it's either played through something or something is played to create this bass facsimile, whatever it is. But it's really interesting sounding. I'm liking it very much, and I'll touch on it a little bit later. So it's about the 18-second mark. The singer joins the fray, and I couldn't go as far as like to describe his singing as I wouldn't go as far as describe it as languid, but there's something loose about his enunciation, as I'm not catching much of what he is saying. I suppose there's some of that singing while yawning sound to his approach that we've got going on here. I caught bits and pieces, but it wasn't like hitting instantly. Like I had to sift a little bit and really focus when I wanted to sort of tune in on the lyrical content. I did catch him saying about something about the rain, and just after he did, the guitar comes in and really leans into that high strum pattern, and it has such a great tone and clarity to it that it instantly caught my attention. And whenever it features that brighter version, would always sort of catch my ear. And just after this, I noticed another voice now accompanying our lead vocalist, and it was up in this higher, like, sort of falsetto region. And then for the first time, I hear with clarity the title of the song as the lead vocalist drops sort of an octave in his voice and sings "Rip It Up and Start Again." Then there is a lot of hoping to God at this point, and I think I catch him singing, "He hopes to God you're not as dumb as you make out," which is quite the pointed line. I would hate to be the person who inspired that lyric. The next verse was a similar experience for me. I didn't catch much of the lyrics until he mentioned the titular line, but I did notice that sweetly strummed guitar and the singer's voice dropping a bit at one point throughout it. We get another hope to God portion that follows, equipped with the hand claps to further accent the downbeat. I think they used it before, but it really stuck out to me at this point as I was sort of looking for, as parts I had played before, played again, I was looking for different things than what I had heard the first time around, trying to catch anything that may have slipped through the cracks initially. But this gives way to another stanza, and I think he mentioned something about a pen and how there are things that one can't quite express. He also mentioned something about acting dumb, something being humdrum, and then he alludes to boredom. I really am only catching like every fifth word here, so I'm sure you can fill in those blanks for me. Then he carries out the note on boredom, and we get treated to this little oddball motif. It sounds like a guitar, but it also has like an affectation to it a little bit as well. What's funny is that tone that the effect gives the guitar makes it sound very similar to the saxophone that then takes the baton. They sort of like
Kind of
bleed right into
mutates,
each other.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the last note, the resonance of that guitar, the sax note picks up right there, and it seems to be the same, or as the close to the same as you can be, which I thought was really interesting, and I like how they sort of deployed that. So then in comes the saxophone, as I alluded to, which plays this nice motif for about 25 or 30 seconds before we get treated to several vocal repetitions of "Rip It Off" and "Start Again," which is eventually joined by some interesting vocalizations and vocal runs as the song fades to completion. Mariah Carey, he is not, as I mentioned, but he's leaning into the vocal runs, and that made me chuckle. So yeah, this was an oddball of a tune, but it's in the most in mostly a good way. It was quirky and interesting, if not a bit repetitive, but it felt like the band was experimenting with something new to them. So I don't blame them for that. Like there weren't a lot of different parts to the song. It all kind of went in a straight line. And I don't know if that is because they were being a little bit safe as they were tinkering with these new sounds and effects or whatever. Either way, it's not like I blame them for that. This was great. And while listening to this, it might sound a little odd, but one of the first things that I thought was really interesting and I would love to hear would be an artist like Thundercat give this a go. I'm sure you remember that we've done Thundercat once on the channel before, and as you described his bass playing in that song, it sounded like a sort of gelatinous, like blob falling over on itself. Though, and he's so talented at making the bass sound myriad different ways. And I would just, for some reason, as odd as it sounds, I'd love to see his like reimagining of this song and what he could do with it with the bass, given how they sort of opened the floodgates to bass experimentation on this track. So yeah, that was just sort of came to mind, something fun that I would love to check out. Regardless, this was a fun little oddball of a song whose lyrical content I would like to learn more in order to help me get a clearer picture of what it is about, outside of my assumption that it is about stopping what you're currently doing and starting all over again from scratch. That's sort of like the rip it off and start a new kind of, feel that I was getting from it. So yeah, tell me a bit more about this one, John. I'm interested in all the quirks and seemingly experimentative qualities of this track.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. You're right in terms of the song and its experimentation and quirkiness. Um, I wasn't a huge fan of the song when it first came out, but I have to say, this song is much beloved and it gets under your skin. And I think three or
Yeah.
four listens and you'll be hooked,
I was
honestly.
just about to say I could see this being a grower,
Yeah,
over
big
time.
time. And the band and the singer are very important in context of music in general. So I'll get into it because there's a lot to get into and some really fun stuff. So scrolling back upwards, here we go. Orange Juice, they were a Scottish jangle pop band founded in Glasgow in 1976. They were initially known as the New Sonics, Sonics, and they changed the name to Orange Juice in 1979. They're labeled as post-punk, new wave, jungle pop, and indie pop. Um,
Mm.
this song is not representative of their early sound.
I would
So,
imagine. After
New Sonics were found.
all the genres you just listed, I'm thinking, ooh, where does this one fit?
Yeah, so New Sonics were founded by Edwin Collins with his college friend Alan Duncan, and basically came out of that sort of punk post-punk scene thingy. The band played locally as they got started, and there was a cavalcade of members in and out, and this continued all the way through the life of the band. So, and one early gig, they supported Steel Pulse, friends of the channel,
Yep.
at Satellite City in January '78. And alongside them were another band called Johnny and the Self Abusers, who we've covered before, who then later were known as Simple Minds. Don't you forget about me.
How
Duncan
could
left
I?
the band, and shortly afterwards, their band rechristened themselves Orange Juice. So, in another early gig at the University of Edinburgh, it was recorded by a chap called Malcolm Ross of the band Joseph K. And one track from this, called Felicity, was pressed as a flexi disc. Oh, them were the days. To be distributed with a planned fanzine to be called Strawberry Switchblade, a name which was later inspired and then adopted for a band formed by friends of the group. I say this because there is the single Strawberry Switchblade.
Nice.
And it was a kind of cult thing since yesterday, the twee pop thing, very cult. I think everybody at my age at the time, which had been 16, fancied both the girls in the band. Anyway, and then we didn't realise until they opened their mouth and they're from Glasgow. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, the debut single from the Orange Juice, Falling and Laughing, was recorded in December '79 for what became Postcard Records. Collins records the recording. We recorded it in 8 hours on a small 8-track in Paisley. And when we finished it, we felt, well, it was rather good. The reason it sounds a bit out of tune is because we couldn't afford a guitar tuner. Anyway, James Kirk was convinced that he had perfect pitch. So it's understandable that the tuner was sometimes a bit out. You'll find from quotes later on that Mr. Collins is what we call a character. A fewer than 1,000 copies of Falling and Laughing were pressed, and most included copies of the Felicity flexi disc. 200 copies were also included a postcard by the band. The wraparound cover and amateur packaging established postcards homespun aesthetic, with the label's tagline the sound of young Scotland, marking it out as something of a reaction to much of the seriousness, po-faced angst of post-punk. So it was released in February 1980. It was Postcard Records' signature tune. Postcard Records was actually sort of set up, to release stuff by Joseph Kay and by Orange Juice. And it was very much at odds with contemporary indie music. It was combining, I mean, their song combined a disco bass line purloined from ELO with jangly guitars reminiscent of the happier side of Velvet Underground. So yeah, it really marked them out as a sort of a scene to watch. And subsequent releases by Joseph Kay and by fellow members of the label Aztec Camera consolidated their reputation at the cutting edge of Scottish pop. But it was Orange Juice that everybody sort of marked out as embodying this sound of young Scotland, with Collins' onstage behaviour, charity shop chic, and occasional self-parody combining camp aesthetics with a subversive rejection of macho rock and roll cliche. Live performances could be shambolic, imagine that, with guitars often out of tune and songs often aborted as drums, bass, and guitar raced away from each other on separate timings.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. However, Radio 1 DJ's John Peel was initially unpressed, describing their music as curious, which I think is a polite euphemism. And he tolerated all sorts of messes, Anyway, his introduction to the band came when he was accosted outside the BBC by Alan Horn of Postcard Records and Edwyn Collins, brandishing a copy of the debut 45, Falling Laughing. The former told the DJ, "All those Manchester Liverpool bands you play, it's all a nice bore. You need to wise up, old man. Forget all that bunny men and teardrop shit. This is the future. Get wise to it now or you're going to look really stupid." Peel confirmed this story a few days later in February 80 when he gave airtime to the record for the first time on his show. Later on, his right-hand man, the producer, John Walters, invited them to record a couple of sessions for the Peel show in the autumn of 80. And the band were then invited on a national tour by Peel favourites, the Undertones, giving them further exposure south of the border. So one of these gigs was at a brand new venue called Rock City in Nottingham, which I know very well from my youth. And they were the support band. So Orange Juice became the first band ever to play at this now legendary venue on the 11th of December 1980. Collins records continuing abuse from the punk contingent in the audience. "We went on tour with the Undertones. There were a load of skinheads. And the minute we come on stage, they shout, 'Puffs!' And we'd shout back, 'Hare Krishna!' Rather than going to denial, we'd camp it up just to annoy people. Of course, later, once we were preaching to the converted, it was time to change course." Orange Juice took the tapes of the demos they recorded for their debut album up to Polydor and got a deal, which really signalled the death knell of Postcard Records, which wound down in 1981. So a very brief period. But as mentioned before, it was hugely important in the development of indie music right at the start of the 80s. There's three sort of areas that were really influential, and that was the Dunedin sound, Flying Nun Records that we covered in New Zealand, and the Paisley Underground sound scene in LA, which we covered as well. So these three bits were really put together what was become indie music. So the band's debut album was released in 82 to mixed reviews, but is now seen as a classic of the era and massive influence on the C86 generation, that sort of jangle pop. As is the case in the start, the band personnel was shuffling like a deck of cards, with members from other bands, like Joseph Kay, coming in and others falling out, etc., etc. So much so that the lineup on the album's shambolic promotional tour was not the lineup that recorded it just a few months before. Edwyn Collins being the only constant member throughout the band's lifetime. So their second album, Rip It Up, was released in November 82. And the personnel at this point was Edwyn Collins, vocals, guitar, violin; Malcolm Ross, guitar, vocals, synthesizer, piano, organ; David McClymont, bass, synthesizer, backing vocals; Zeke Manika, drums, vocals, percussion, synthesizer, with Dick Morrissey, saxophone; Martin Drover, flugelhorn; Martin Hales, piano, synthesizer; Mel Gaynor, percussion; Louise Waddle, hand claps; Gavin Wright, violin; Paul Quinn, vocals; and Danny Cummins, percussion on track. So a very eclectic and well-produced album. It received some poor reviews as those who had previously championed the band turned on them. The Enemy suggested that their postcard singles serve them better than any fetchingly polished album ever will, describing the album as faceless pop music. Classic music paper behavior. Despite mixed reviews, the album Rip It Up was to spawn the single, the title, same name, which you listened to, which ultimately reached number 8 in the UK singles chart in 1983, the band's only top 40 hit. The singles promoted through 2 memorable Top of the Pops performances, included one where bass player David McClelmont appeared to fall into the crowd, apparently inebriated, and it gave the band a ban from the program.
Mm.
In 2014, Enemy ranked the song number 216 in its list of 500 greatest songs of all time.
Wow.
It was also included by Pitchfork and number 157 in their list of best 200 songs of the 1980s. But what the hell do those guys know? So, what are the lyrics? And it's some interesting, there's an Easter egg in there as well, and it's very interesting. When I first saw you, something stirred within me. You were standing sultry in the rain. If I could have held you, I would have held you. Rip it up and start again. Rip it up and start again, rip it up and start again. I hope to God you're not as dumb as you make out. I hope to God, I hope to God. And I hope to God I'm not as numb as you make out. I hope to God, I hope to God. And when I next saw you, my heart reached out for you, but my arms stuck like glue to my sides. If I could have held you, I would have held you, choke rather than swallow my pride. Rip it up and start again, rip it up and start again. I hope to God you're not as dumb as you make out. I hope to God, I hope to God. I hope to God I'm not as numb as you make out. I hope to God, I hope to God. And there were times I'd take my pen and feel obliged to start again. I do profess that there are things in life that one can't quite express. You know me, I'm acting dum-dum. You know this scene is very humdrum. And my favourite song is entitled Boredom. So, just to break there for a second, the Buzzcocks, their first EP, Spiral Scratch, which still had Howard DeVito in at the time, the lead track was called Boredom. The lyrics go, you know me, I'm acting dumb. You know the scene, very humdrum. Boredom, 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 dumb. And from there, you have a 2-note guitar solo in that song, which they reenact straight after with him. And it goes, do it, do it. At the very start of it, it's just like the Boredom solo.
Uh-huh.
And then, as you rightly said, it morphs into this wonderful sax.
Yeah.
And there's the sort of, just in those like 5 seconds, it encapsulates they're starting from this post-punk scene and going into this sort of more pop side of it. And that's just a brilliant sort of like summation of it. And then they go back and, as you say, rip it up and start again. I said, 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 rip it up and rip it up, rip it up and rip it up, rip it up and start again. Then he goes, hoo, 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 which to me sounds just like David Bowie there, just for that one line. Rip it up, rip it up, rip it up, fade out. So, yeah, it's just a classic and really is much beloved by many people. The follow-up single to Rip It Up, Flesh of My Flesh, failed to build on its success, peaking at number 41 in the spring of 83. New single Place in My Heart was scheduled for October 83 as a teaser for an album to follow the next month. However, both the single and the album were pulled, following Ross and McClemont's decision to leave the group, citing musical differences, which means we think that guy's a twat.
Oh, that
At
old
this
chestnut.
point, Orange Juice had a core lineup of Collins and Manika, the former being more outspoken about political issues such as the UK miners' strike, Scottish nationalism and Thatcherism, as well as those bands who were inspired by Postcard Records' sound, but were beginning to eclipse Orange Juice in the charts, like The Smiths, and also Polydor label mates Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. And so Collins, never short of a quote, he said, he talked about Newcastle-based Kitchenware Records, saying, Kitchenware Records are completely a surrogate postcard. They have the whole look down to a T. I don't know if it was the Dainties or Hurrah, but when they came to Glasgow, they were called the Green-Eyed Children, were fairly punky, but they must have seen us all wearing our floppy fringes. It's flattering in a way, but I don't like that music. The duo of Collins and Manika proceeded to continue recording Orange Juice's final album, The Orange Juice, The album was named with reference to the third album by the Velvet Underground, so it's a
Mm.
reference back to that. Again, critically acclaimed, the album's blue-eyed soul influences preceded other 1980s Scottish acts that took inspiration from this genre. The lead single, What Presents, also failed to break into the top 40. The band's final show was in January 85 at a gig for the UK miners' strike, where they came on as the first act before Aztec took camera and Everything But the Girl, announcing it was their last gig to a half-empty venue. The final song was Rock and Roll, brackets, I Gave You the Best Years of My Life, end brackets, a cover of a Kevin Johnson song. Evan Collins later said, Orange Juice had come to an end. Polydor was dropping me, and Zeke was busy with his solo career. It came to its own conclusion, really. So I said, I might as well say this would be Orange Juice's last gig. It was Grace Maxwell's idea to play Rock and Roll. I Gave You the Best Years of My Life by Kevin Johnson. And Zeke followed me through London, through 100 hotel rooms, through 100 record companies who did like my tunes. That's some of the lyrics he sung. There were people crying in the audience, he said.
Mm.
Following the split, Collins, managed by Grace Maxwell, who later became his wife, signed for Creation Records the same year, with his solo debut single, Don't Shilly Shallow, released in 86. In 1994, his track, A Girl Like You, became a global hit, spending 7 weeks inside the top 10 in the UK alone. And I will at some point get onto Ed and Collins' solo work, so I won't go on that too much.
Okay.
Reputed that the band James were encouraged to change their name after supporting Orange Juice in Sheffield in 1982, with James Kirk suggesting that their previous name, Model Team International, was poorly chosen and they should name their band after him. Details of this particular gig are not clear, although Paul Gibbertson, the co-founder of James, is on record as being a major Orange Juice fan, so it could be true.
Mm.
While never enjoying prolonged commercial success, Orange Juice were to exercise huge influence over the indie pop and indie rock scenes in the mid and late 80s, particularly the UK. Commentators often noted the debt that Smiths owed to Collins' lyrics, while a number of other later 80s bands were to cite Orange Juice and other postcard records as an influence, with the C86 scene featuring numerous acts that either covered Orange Juice songs, such as The Wedding Present, or borrowed elements of their early sound, such as Mighty Mighty, the Chesterfields, the June Brides, and the Bodines.
That's really interesting because of the way I described his vocal delivery. There's only one other person on this channel that I've compared that vocal styling to, and I'll leave it to you listeners to figure out who I'm talking about there. But the sound of the music is not there, but but there is some similarity in the vocal delivery intact.
I think he drops down, he goes quite low deliberately. It's this fake macho thing that he's taking the piss out of.
Okay.
I think all the time he's almost all the time he's taking the piss out of something. Bless him. So yeah, aesthetically, the Orange Juice, their early look was floppy fringes and check shirts, or you would call plaid, and they became the de facto uniform of late 80s indie scene, to the indifference of Collins, who sometimes mocked these acts on his live shows. In the 2000s, a new wave of indie bands, including Franz Ferdinand, Bell and Sebastian, etc., proclaimed Orange Juice as an influence, triggering renewed interest in the band. Franz Ferdinand's label, the Domino Recording Company, responded by issuing a collection of postcard singles in 2005 entitled The Glasgow School. And by way of a footnote, current UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer chose Falling and Laughing, the debut single, as one of his Desert Island discs
Oh, wow.
in 2020. So there you go. I don't think it was quite the Gordon Brown Arctic Monkeys moment.
That did come to mind when you said that.
Someone just told him he clearly didn't know who the hell they were. And someone told him, say that because they're popular. I think he just did this for the show. But yeah, so there you go. Hugely charismatic and quirky and all those sort of things. And the song reflects that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting stuff.
It was. I loved listening to this. I mean, it was that the outside of the box approach to how the bass and some of those other sounds were constructed and deployed is enough for me to grab my attention. So yeah, I had a lot of fun listening to this.
Excellent. Right, I shall wrap things up. Folks out there, please tell us what you think. If you like this, do hit the like button, and drop some comments. Tell us what you think. Other Orange Juice tracks. I have to say, although I do love this song, I do prefer the first album overall. It's just me. That's the way I roll. But please tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. And all this could be yours 5 days a week, or whatever you like, actually, because it's just on the internet, isn't it? So, don't know why I said that, but we put out 5 a week. So there you go.
There you go.
That being said, thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.